So something absolutely brilliant happened and was published, I believe, today. Let me double check. This is something I just got referred to. Yeah, actually, it was published yesterday. It's a 45-minute read. James A. Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, and Peter Boghossian published the most brilliant thing that I've ever seen done in the history of academics, and that is to demonstrate the political bias within the social and humanities studies. We're talking about gender studies. We're talking about the feminist studies, queer studies, the whole social sciences that have been corrupt by this political, postmodern philosophical nonsense and bullshit. I'm going to go into a multi-part series of what the problems are, and in detail, hopefully. But this thing is absolutely brilliant. I've read through part of it already, but this is going to be pretty much a fresh take. So yeah, let's dive into this shit.
Oh, yes, Sin. We've got a big case here. Where have you been?
All right, so it reads Academic Grievance Studies and the Corruption of Scholarship. So here's their introduction. Something has gone wrong in the university, especially in certain fields within humanities. Scholarship based less upon finding truth and more upon attending social grievances that have become firmly established, if not fully dominant within these fields, and their scholars increasingly bully students, administrators, and other departments into adhering to the worldview. This worldview is not scientific. It is not rigorous. And I agree. It's postmodern. It's what Jordan Peterson talks about all the time. It's about what Gad Saad says about all the time. Basically, this culture war on full display at the source, because they've been at this shit since the 60s and 70s. I think it was my white privilege or it was the male, no, it was the male privilege one where I demonstrated how far back this bullshit goes as far as their academic research goes. It's all been perception and stupidity and has never been empirical. Anyways, they spent a lot of time writing academic papers and publishing them in respected peer-reviewed journals associated with the fields of scholarship loosely known as cultural studies or identity studies, for example, gender studies, or critical theory, because it is rooted in postmodern brand of theory, which arose in the late 60s. So to give you an idea, this critical theory, as they put it, is literally Marxism applied to identity. Critical theory is the idea that there is a dichotomy. It's black and white thinking, essentially. I'm going to do a video on that too, eventually. And it's us versus them, oppressed versus the oppressor, minorities versus white people. Whoever's in the majority is the oppressor. Whoever's in the minority is the oppressed. And it doesn't matter in what aspect you are. If you're perceived to be a minority or you're perceived to be oppressed in some way because of some slight or thing or whatever, then clearly you are just in doing whatever means necessary to make everything equal by force, almost literally. So anyways, as a result of this work, we have come to call these fields grievance studies, because they are, in shorthand, because of their common goal of problematizing aspects of culture in minute detail in order to attempt to diagnose the power imbalances of oppression rooted in identity. That is literally critical theory right there. It's just garbage. So we undertook this project to study, understand, and expose the reality of grievance studies, which is corrupting academic research. In fact, I know this all too well. I submitted 3 papers this year to be reviewed and possibly published. All 3 were rejected because I did my topics on the inclusion of identity and inclusion within organizations and how it's daringly close to violating EEOC laws and doing a retroactive fit to basically discriminate people based on race and color because you want gender parity or because you want more ethnic minorities or some shit in your company, which is illegal according to the government currently, but they'd like to overturn that because it seems to be that they want equal opportunity of outcome. Anyways, because open, good faith conversation around these topics of identity, such as gender, race, and sexuality, is nearly impossible, which is true, except for Mythicist Milwaukee demonstrated it was kind of okay, But the problem is the two that actually did, Vadim, the dipshit Newquist, and Christiosity were there not in good faith. It was garbage to watch that one, but everything else seemed to be okay. Ironically, most everybody agreed with each other on stage, so it was okay. Anyways, our aim has been reboot these conversations. We hoped this will give, especially those who believe in liberalism, progress, modernity, open inquiry, and social justice, a clear reason to look at identitarian madness coming out of the academic and activist left and say, no, we will not go along with that. What they did in here is absolutely brilliant. I will leave a link in the description. You need to take a read. They go over their methods, but what I really wanted to do is I wanted to dodge down here to, well, we'll start right here. They wrote 20 papers, submitted them to the best journals with relevant fields. More on this below. With considerable success, even though we had to take the project public prematurely and thus stop the study before it could be properly concluded. At the time of this publishing, they had 7 papers accepted out of 20, so almost half. 4 of them were published online. 3 have been accepted without having time to see publication through, which means the 4 that were published, they were like immediately up online and everybody could read them. The other 3, they probably had to go to print, which can take a lot longer. Most of the time journals are like produced once a quarter, so you won't see that. Your paper won't be in there for like 3 months. It's quite possibly that true. 7 papers still in play, which means they had to call a halt to 7 of them, but they had 7 accepted, which means out of 20, 2/3 were either in play or still ongoing. And, you know, that's significant. You're talking 1/3 of these were accepted. That's out of 20, that's a large number of papers for academic journals. You're lucky to get 1 published a year, let alone 7. 1 is a lucky number for publishing papers. I've written several. I've not had 1 published yet, if that tells you anything. And I don't even do that full time. This is part time. For those that are in academia all the time, they publish 50 or so papers, maybe more, maybe less, because that's all they do is write constantly all day. Professors, that's all they do is write and research. Grade papers on the side, essentially. Teach a class on the side. It's like 2 hours out of the day. The most of the time they write. They're trying to discover new knowledge, except for these dumbasses. So basically they did the work of about 8 years of actual, or 8 to 5 years of actual academic research in the size of 1 year, which tells you a lot about this industry that is existing within our academic circles. It's ridiculous. So on the ones that they called a halt, 2 have been revised and resubmitted, meaning that they were sent back with some errors. Maybe it was grammar errors or something like that, and they just didn't catch it. So if they revise and resubmit, they're usually accepted. The revise and resubmit means we liked it, but you know, you had some grammar errors, you spelled this word wrong, there's something wrong here, so go fix it. And that's pretty much it. 1 still under review, 4 are left hanging with no time to submit them to drills after rejection, revise, resubmit, or reject, resubmit. So they had 2 that were actually rejected. 6 were retired as flawed or beyond repair. So they had 4 that were just disgusting and couldn't be published. So out of the 20 papers, 6 were flawed, that couldn't be used. They were garbage. That means 2/3 of these papers, 2/3 were accepted by this freaking outrage studies. What did they call it? Let me go back up here. I'm gonna co-opt that. Grievance studies. That's right. So out of that, and this freaking blew my mind. 4 invitations to peer review other papers as a result of their own exemplary scholarship. I've gotten invitations to peer review other people's work based on my scholarship. That is not a small thing. They look for somebody that's an expert in the field that has published before and say, hey, do you want to review what this other person has written and see if you like it or not? I've only done 1 so far this year, and I had to reject it because it was lacking Like, its data was flawed. It was not where it needed to be for publication. But I have academic integrity, so that might tell you something. Maybe, maybe not. For ethical reasons, they declined to invite, or they declined all invitations. We had to fully participate in their culture this way. However, it would have been an unrivaled opportunity to tinker with how far we could take the hypothesis that the canon of literature in these fields is skewed in part because of the peer-reviewed process which encourage existing political ideological biases. One paper, the one about rape culture and dog parts, more to come on that shit, gained special recognition for excellence from his journal Gender, Place, and Culture, a highly ranked journal amongst the leads fields of feminist geography. Fuck off, ad. The journal honored it as one of the 12 leading pieces in feminist geography as a part of the 25th anniversary celebration. Think about that for a second. Geography is not good enough. We need feminist geography. So the study of Earth from a feminist lens, meaning the patriarchy rules everything and they cause land masses to not move as fast as they could because patriarchy. How? Feminism, a political ideology applied to geography, makes no damn sense whatsoever. But apparently they exist, which is wow. So they spent 10 months writing these papers, averaging a new one paper roughly every 13 days. 7 papers published over 7 years is frequently claimed to be the number sufficient to earn tenure at most universities, which is true. If you're able to publish once a year, you could get tenured at a university. Depending on the university, of course, but getting one published, like I said, I've submitted 5 this year. All were rejected. If they could submit 20, because there was 3 authors, if they could submit 20 in 10 months and 7 were accepted, with 7 possibly being accepted, and 6 that were flat out fails, there's something wrong with this fucking, it's just, wow. So, more of this tells them how long it took them to complete and whatnot. Let's get to the really fun part. Why did they do this? Well, because they're racist, sexist, bigoted, misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, trans-hysterical, anthropocentric, problematic, privileged, bullying, far-right wing, cis, hetero, straight white males, and one white female who is demonstrating in her internal misogyny an overwhelming need for male approval, who wanted to enable bigotry to preserve our privilege and take the side of hate. Oh, that's a question mark. Yeah, no, none of those apply. Nevertheless, we will be accused of it, and we'll have some insights as to why. Anybody that's talked to Helen Pluckrose can tell you that she's not like that. I've not talked to Jeffrey. I've briefly had a discussion or conversation with Peter Boghossian, but it was very fleeting, and it was through somebody else, so I didn't have direct conversation with him. So I was kind of shielded, which sucks. But yeah, these 3 people are definitely against postmodernism in all its forms. It's ridiculous. It's disgusting. It's non-scientific. We can go on and on about it. Pretty much everybody that is listening to this probably already knows that it's just garbage. And it all started from academia in the Frankfurt School. Well, kind of. University of Columbia pretty much kicked this shit off. So you can thank them. Maybe no one should ever go to that college ever again. Anyways, too many not involved in academia, particularly those who are skeptical of its worth generally, may seem like we're addressing yet another obscure academic squabble of little relevance to the world. You're mistaken. The problem we've been studying is of utmost relevance to the real world and everyone in it. As anyone can see of the shit that's happening on college campuses and then bleeding into our government at this point with the shit we just saw with Kavanaugh, will understand that the influence that they're pushing through their shit that they've done is all over the place. Name one company in the world at this point, except for maybe companies in places like Japan or China, that do not have an office of diversity. or Office of Global Diversity, or the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, or an Executive of Diversity and Inclusion. Name one. It is pervasive in all of our lives, and it won't go away. More on that in another video, of course. I'm going to do a multi-part series. I'm going to kick it off with this guy because it's that fucking brilliant. So anyways, skipping down here, I wanted to get to the really fun stuff. So right here. So the one that won their critically, this is the one that they love the most, which is funny. So they're going to list down the ones that actually were published, and you can review every single one of the papers and actually read them if you want. I plan on going through them. Maybe I'll do a multi-part series and cover these, and just maybe go over the abstracts so that it doesn't take up freaking 6 hours worth of video. You notice that they kind of shoveled their names a little bit. So the title: Human Reactions to Rape Culture and Queer Performativity in Urban Dog Parks in Portland, Oregon. Accepted and published. Recognized for excellence. Expression of concern raised on it following journalistic interest, leading us to have to conclude the project early. Because it got so much notoriety, they got caught. That's pretty much what that says. So the thesis on this: dog parks are rape condoning spaces and places of rampant canine rape culture and systemic oppression against the oppressed dog, through which human attitudes to both problems can be measured. This provides insight into training men out of sexual violence and bigotry to which they are prone. What this says is, because if you take your dogs to a dog park, and not all dogs are neutered, so therefore some are in heat, male dogs will just go up and hump female dogs because they're there. Literally, that's what that means. And then humans, in this case, are complicit in this behavior. And since it's the male dogs that just go up and hump a female dog or somebody else's leg, they just go up and hump everything, they are oppressing the female dogs, thus it translates into human attitudes, and it might give us an insight on how to train men like we would train dogs. That's literally what they're saying here. Purpose: to see if journals will accept arguments which should clearly be ludicrous and unethical if they provide an unfalsifiable way to perpetrate notions of toxic masculinity, heteronormativity, implicit bias. So toxic masculinity, which if you go watch my video on toxic masculinity, it's basically some jackass that was a psychologist, studied inmates and said, yes, because inmates act this way, all men act this way. Not true whatsoever. Definitely a biased sample, to say the least. So not generalizable in his findings whatsoever. But it's just, what the fuck? So basically, because dogs rape, we can train men for sexual violence and bigotry. This is the one that stopped their approach and basically made things just gorgeous. So they had some reviewer comments. You can come back and read this. Fat bodybuilding. Title: Who are they to judge? Overcoming anthropometry. Wow. Anthropometry. I can't say that word. Anthropometry? And a framework for fat bodybuilding. So you can see they flip their names again. A real person who gave us permission to use his scholarly identity for this project. So this is actually somebody that said, yeah, go ahead, use me. It's going to be hilarious. So their thesis: it is only oppressive cultural norms which make society regard the building of muscle rather than fat admirable, and that bodybuilding and activism on behalf of the fat should be benefited from, including fat bodies displayed in non-competitive ways. Purpose: to see if journal will accept arguments which are ludicrous and possibly dangerous to the health if they support cultural constructivist arguments around body positivity and fat phobia. So what this thesis said is that because bodybuilding is a competitive sport, it's the person that can get the most definition and size out of their muscles wins. Well, if we're into fat acceptance and body positivity, something that Barba, for you to see, would love to hear about, then basically there should be a competition that's not a competition for fat people. The bigger you are, the more likely you are to win this competition. But it's not a competition, which means everybody should get a trophy for just participating. So it's one of those competitions where everybody gets a participation trophy. No one's selected for the best dress or the best chunk or the best hip size or whatever the fuck. But it's instead of bodybuilding, it's fat building. So you basically are competing for the most person to put food in their mouth and not work out. So go ahead. Oh my God. So go ahead and read those when you get a chance. Dildos. Oh my God. So this is fictional. This is under sexuality and culture. Going through the back door, challenging straight male homo hysteria and transphobia through receptive penetration sex toy use. Yeah. Butt sex with toys. That's what it says. That it is suspicious that men rarely anally self-penetrate using sex toys, and this is probably due to fear of being thought of homosexual, also known as homo hysteria, and bigotry against trans people, transphobia. It combines these ideas into a novel concept called trans hysteria, which was suggested by one of the paper's peer reviewers. So a peer reviewer gave the suggestion to use a new term. Jesus Christ. Encourage them to engage in receptive penetration. Anal eroticism will decrease transphobia and increase feminist values. In other words, if men shove a dildo up their ass, they're more likely to become less transphobic and more of a feminist. Just take the D in the ass. Just do it. Just shove that dildo right up in there. Get it deep. Get it deep. Dig. Maybe shit on it a little bit. And you'll be a feminist. Yeah. To see if this, after ludicrous comments, if they support unfalsifiable claims that common and harmless sexual choices made by straight men are actually homophobic, transphobic, and anti-feminist. So being straight is the problem. Literally. It was accepted and published. Read the comments. Oh my God. Hooters! And oh my God. I'm going to get into these as well. I'm going to do a video about this one. An ethnography of restaurant masculinity, themes of objectification, sexual conquest, male control, and masculine toughness in a sexually objectifying restaurant. This guy, I think this is the same guy that they were allowed to use his name. Men frequent restaurants like Hooters because they are nostalgic for patriarchal dominance and enjoy being able to order attractive women around. The environment that restaurants provide facilitating this encourages men to identify sexual objectification and sexual conquest along with masculine toughness and male dominance with the authentic masculinity. The data clearly nonsense. The data are clearly nonsense and conclusions drawn from it are unwarranted by it. Oh. Full disclosure, one reviewer did raise concerns about the rigor of the data. Fair enough. That's a good question, but you approved it anyways. Good job. What the fuck? So basically it's saying, if you go to Hooters, you go there because you like to boss women around and you like to look at their boobs. It's probably half true, I'm not going to lie. Bossing women around. I've never actually been to Hooters. One of these days I should go because I've heard they've had like shit food but good beer or something like that. But basically they say that Hooters exists because men like to objectify women, and that's it, right? Oh, but we've not gotten to the best yet. I'm gonna skip down here a little bit. Moon meetings. No. There it is. This, by far, is the creme de la creme. It's not published yet, and it might not be now that they've released this, but holy shit, is this the best thing I've ever seen in my life to prove how fascist these little fuckers are. They are completely socialist. They should not be taken seriously. Every one of these colleges have this section of their college completely defunded. All the professors fired. You're done for the rest of your lives. I hope you like living on the street. Our struggle is my struggle. The solidarity feminism is an intersectional reply to neoliberal and choice feminism. Literally what they did in this one. Well, let me read the thesis first. That feminism, which foregrounds individual choice and responsibility and female agency and strength, can be countered by a feminism which unifies in solidarity around the victimhood of the most marginalized women in society. To see if we could find theory to make anything grievance related, in this case, part of Chapter 12, Volume 1 of Mein Kampf. With fashionable buzzwords switched in. Acceptable to journals if we mixed and matched fashionable arguments. So this is what they did. They took Hitler's Mein Kampf, chapter 12, where he's talking about socialist ideals and unifying Germany around, because the German people, the Workers' Party, was marginalized and they needed to group together to fight their oppressive bourgeois class or some shit like that. Or the proletariat, I forget which one's which. To fight their oppressors, fight the government, essentially. Overthrow them because National Socialism is the way to go. So they used Hitler's Mein Kampf and got an accepted paper published in an academic journal called Aphilia. Oh my God. That's just fucking brilliant. This is the cream on the crop for me. I think I'm going to end the video here. I've already gone 30 minutes into this. There is 45 minutes of read right here. I didn't go through it all. I skipped a lot of their subject matter where they talked about what they did, why they did it, the process, how they did it, their methods, so they can demonstrate they were trying to be unbiased, yet they were trying to do this to prove a point, is what's really what happened here. And they did prove that point. The fact that they got 2/3 of their articles published out of 20 when it takes 7 over 7 years to become tenured, if you're lucky to get one published a year, is absolutely astounding. I have more coming on this in next videos regarding the methods and the problems with this. It might get a little bit boring because it's all academic stuff, but I wanted to point it out because here's the kicker. When these little bastards say studies have shown, they're referring to this. They're referring to shit like this. They're referring to the academic research grounded in feminism. It is not research. It's propaganda. It's consider it this way. So they had nearly every atheist knows how the Bible was built. It was built by Constantine. They put a bunch of people together and they basically said, we got the Bible now. They put a bunch of different testaments together and saying, no, mine is the right doctrine and no, mine is the right document and God exists and all of these. And let's just meld them together, and like 20 plus authors. Even the apologists try to say that this is credit to the Bible. Well, that's the modern version of postmodern feminism and intersectionality and basically grievance studies, as they put it. They are making their own doctrine, is literally what's happening before everyone's eyes. Academia and the postmodern thought is making their own doctrine, and they're putting it together, and this is the result. If you can get a section of Mein Kampf published by just switching the German party and the people that are oppressed with marginalized groups and marginalized people of color that are women, you've got a fucking problem. They've been caught with their pants down, essentially, with this report. And I think everybody should know about it by now. Even Ben Shapiro said something about it, and he barely covered it. But Jesus Christ. Link in the description. Go ahead and read through all these. You can read the publications. I hope Gad Sad gets a hold of this and just... goddamn. This was brilliant. Hats off to Helen Pluckrose, Jeffrey... I'm sorry, I forgot your last name. And Peter Boghossian. You guys are brilliant. I already had mad respect for all three of you. Anyways, and this was just icing on the cake for me. knowing what I've had to go through just in leadership and organizational psychology and those realms, and how my shit gets rejected because I don't because I'm against diversity and inclusion, essentially, as a concept being promoted anywhere. Yeah, it's flabbergasting to me. It just makes no sense. So I hope you enjoyed this. More to come. I'm going to break down some of these concepts. I've been meaning to for a long ass time. It's keen opportunity to do it now. I mean, this is brilliant. I'm going to take full advantage. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed.
Your kung fu is good, but you are too emotional.